this transition you made about 6 or 7 years ago, where your attention, your focus shifted away from the individual or personal process of spiritual transformation to what you call the global emergent consciousness of oneness, has, as you said, been a big shift for your work. Why did you make that shift? And what is this emerging consciousness of oneness?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. For many years, the focus of my teaching and writing was on the traditional stages of the Sufi path, the journey of the soul back to the source, from separation back to union with God, with all of the traditional experiences, such as longing, that belong to Sufism. And I am by nature a kind of traditional mystic, that the New Age spiritual teaching, so to speak, didn't mean very much to me. My focus was on the inner experiences of the individual, the inner mystical experiences that really belong to classical Sufism. And then a strange thing happened in the spring of the year 2000. Suddenly my attention was shifted. It's like somebody turned my head from here to there, and then I saw this, what I have called this emerging consciousness of oneness, that there is something awakening in the world that hasn't been here before, and that it, in a way, it has its, you can trace it back to the mystical understanding of oneness, because oneness is a basic mystical experience. Many, many, many people have had experiences of oneness. They've woken up for a moment and, like the poet William Blake said, to see the world in a grain of sand. They have had those momentary experiences. They see that everything is one. They see the universe is one dynamic whole. But the idea that this might become part of our collective human experience, not just an individual mystical experience, which it has been traditionally in the past, the unio mystica of the mystics, that somehow the whole of humanity is taking a step to a different level of awareness. This really began to interest me, and then I began to see signs of it around, signs in this global consciousness, and how quickly we have developed global communication, the internet, and other examples, also ecology, the realizing that we're all one part of one interdependent whole, and that the only way for humanity to survive is to really to take responsibility for ourselves as one living planet and as one race that is responsible for that planet. And then I began to think, what role does the mystic have to play in this new emerging global consciousness? And that is kind of the direction my work has taken me.
Do you feel that it's the responsibility of all spiritual teachers to work for the sake of the whole?
I would like to think that it's the responsibility of anybody, everybody, every human being, really, to work for the sake of the whole. I do think that those people who have been awakened more to the light within them, to the spiritual dimension of themselves, have an added responsibility. But it's interesting because traditionally, for example, shamanism, alchemy, all those ancient traditions that honored the earth and honored the relationship we have to the earth, to the world of matter, they were always done for the sake of the whole. The shamanism was always in relationship to the whole. So the fact that, if you like, spiritual progress or spiritual life might be just about you is really, in a way, an illusion, because it can never be just about you. But we seem to have been caught in this paradigm of self-interest, not just materially, but sadly also spiritually, in which people's spiritual focus is just on their own inner development, rather than embracing the larger dimension of how does that reflect into the relationship to the whole of creation.
How do you think that can be broken? How do you think that can change within the individual as well as within the collective spiritual environment, especially in America?
That's a very, very good question. How can people make the shift from being focused on their own welfare, either materially or spiritually, into an understanding that they have to really to make a step? And I must admit, I don't really know. I would like to think that you could just tell people, look, there is this extraordinary oneness of which we are a part. There is this beautiful, luminous being which is the world, and it needs our help. It needs our help materially, ecologically, and also, from my perspective, very importantly, spiritually. And initially, I thought that if one just made people aware of this idea. This was the first book I wrote about this, working with oneness. I really thought that if people just glimpsed that potential, that they could step into this arena of global oneness and contribute their spiritual awareness to this vitally important work, this knowing that we are all one and we have a part to play, a responsibility to play in this work. I thought something in people would just respond with joy, with celebration, that they could actually make a real contribution to the state of the world. But I have been kind of sadly shown that people are still very, very caught, even spiritually, in the focus on their own individual inner work. Of course, there are many people in all sorts of fields who are working in this field of emerging global consciousness of oneness. But there are also many people who really should and could be making a much bigger contribution, and for somehow this veil of it's about me.
But I mean, as a spiritual teacher, you know that as much as you're going to talk to people about things, it's really only when they have an experience for themselves that they're able to make the step. So how would you be able to provide people with an experience of this consciousness of oneness, which would then take them out of themselves and realize that they are part of this bigger whole, and to do it on a collective level rather than on an individual level, because there's not enough time for that.
Yeah, I mean, the traditional teaching is, you sweep the door, you sweep the floor in front of your own door, you work upon yourself, and that is your contribution to the whole. And that is kind of the traditional approach. You do your own work on your own realization, and that is the best contribution you can make to the work of the whole. And like you, I don't think that is enough. I think there has to be a bigger awareness of the contribution we can make. Now, as you say, traditionally, you only begin spiritual life when something in you is awakened, when you have had an experience. The Sufis call it tauba, the turning of the heart. Something in you glimpses another reality than just the world of the senses, than just the world of the mind and the emotions. And then traditionally the spiritual journey begins. This is this moment of grace that is given to the human being. And so I suppose you are right, that there has to be if you like, a moment of collective grace to wake up the whole of humanity, but it doesn't seem to have happened yet. And all I can do is say there seems to be a need to prepare the ground so that if such a moment should happen, if there should be something that collectively awakens humanity, the whole of humanity, to this other reality that is so present, because it's not something abstract, it's not an ideal, it's the fact that everything is one is an ecological reality. It is a reality on many levels that one can begin to prepare the stepping stones, so to speak, the foundations, so that if this moment of grace should happen to the whole, not just to humanity, because I think it happens to the whole world. I think it is a global awakening, means an awakening of the world. So the foundations are made. Otherwise, as T.S. Eliot said, we had the experience but missed the meaning. And But how it is going to happen, I don't know. I thought it would be much simpler, and I thought there would be something in a way, the heart of every seeker that would respond.
But it's not just about the seeker, because if it's going to be a global consciousness, a global shift, it can't just be limited to the few who are serious spiritual practitioners. It has to be available to people who aren't so interested in spiritual life and aren't willing to devote, their life to that pursuit.
Yeah, you are right, and I think it can happen on all levels. I think on an ecological level, there is already a fundamental awareness that we are one living organism, this interdependent, interrelated ecological system. I think the internet is an example of on a communications level of oneness. I do think that traditionally spiritual practitioners, or those who have access to something that is not in this world, have a part to play. I think they are needed to, in a way, to be the pioneers of consciousness.
To be the stepping stones you see, that you describe.
Yes, because I think this has always been their role in the past. If you go back to the foundations of Western civilization that came from Empedocles and Parmenides, you would see that they were mystics, and they brought through the understandings of rationalism that is the foundation of our Western culture from mystical experiences.
But just like then, as in now, they were dismissed and viewed as illogical and unnecessary.
They were dismissed later, but they still have created the foundations, and mystics don't expect to be understood. But again, how it is going to happen, I don't know. I, as a mystic, believe in the grace of God. I think it is really only through the grace of God can any real change happen, either to an individual or to the world. And if you like, that is the one limitation I see in so many people who make a sincere commitment to this work of oneness, to this global work, is they don't take into account the grace of God. They think that we, human beings, have to do it all ourselves. And we can never do it all ourselves, not in a million years. Rumi, he says, with all your efforts, you can't even get to the first way station. So the world is going through a transformation. That is not news anymore. That is going through a time of crisis. And any time of crisis has the possibility for transformation. And there are many people around the world who are committed to this, on, say, whether on a financial level or on ecological level or cultural level, to this work of oneness, bringing together people of different races, this interfaith work. There are many, many fields in which humanity is coming together in new ways. But, as I say, what I have found lacking in a lot of their approaches is they think we have to do it all ourselves. And I think we need the help of God. I think we can participate. I think we can be, like the Sufi says, attentive, waiting, receptive for when the beloved comes, for when the divine comes. Can we do it ourselves? No. Can we wake up the world? No. But we can be ready, waiting, and prepared for that global transformation if and when it happens. And that is my sincere belief as a mystic, because as a mystic, everything really in the end is about the will of God.
But on a practical level, the work you have done is, like you said, kind of tilling the soil, preparing things.
Preparing people.
So when you say preparing people, you're preparing people to participate in this work of global transformation, or are you preparing something on an energetic level, on a spiritual level?
Yeah. Yes, I have been given the responsibility, if you like, of working with a Sufi tradition in the West, this Naqshbandi tradition that came from India when my sheikh died in 1966, and it was brought to the West by Irina Tweedy, and it has been in the West now for 40 years. And during that time, a number of very sincere people have been attracted to the path and have done the practices of the path and have begun to access and work on their own spiritual nature. And part of the transition, if you like, that happened in my work in the year 2000 was before the focus of the work we were doing as a group, when we worked together as a group, was on supporting our own individual inner journey. Say the traditional journey, the Sufis call it the journey home, the journey of the seeker back to God. And then the shift that happened in the year 2000 was, how can we work together to help this global transition, to help to support this awakening consciousness of oneness? And then the work shifted, and I began to have access to teachings, spiritual teachings that are not much known in the West, of how a group of spiritually committed individuals can work together to support the evolution of the whole. And so I have begun to train the people attracted to this path in the West to do this work. And for example, I'll give you a simple example. It may be esoteric, but it's actually quite simple, is that traditionally the mystic has been, if you like, outside of society. They have been on the fringes. Often they were hermits, or Sufism is not a monastic path, but you turned away from the outer world and you sought the truth within your own heart. But part of this work of global transformation is that it has to happen in the midst of life. It cannot happen on the periphery of life, because it is about oneness, it is about the need of the time, it is about the world as it is, not some spiritual world we would like to imagine. And so there is a need for the people involved in this work to be what we Sufis call in the marketplace of life, to be in the midst of life, to be just ordinary people living ordinary everyday lives in the midst of life, supporting their children or their families or in their workplace, and not trying to live some sort of spiritual life on the fringes. So part of the initial work was really to bring the people on this path into the midst of life, to say, look, it is important that you have an ordinary job. That is part of your spiritual practice. That you are just part of everyday life, because only in the midst of everyday life can any changes take place. And then to bring the simple Sufi practices, like, for example, the awareness of God, the awareness of breath, the remembrance of God, into the center of life. Because in those simple but very ancient Sufi practices, a certain energy is channeled. Through the awareness of breath, through the remembrance of God, a certain energy is brought, the Sufis call it, from the heart of hearts, or from the beloved, from God, into where you are. And if that energy, which belongs to God, comes into the midst of the world, that divine stream of divine consciousness, which is what it is, comes into the midst of this world, into the marketplace, into the ordinary everyday life, whether it's in Manhattan or London or Los Angeles or wherever you are, or you don't have to be in a city, but in the midst of ordinary everyday life, then that can lay the groundwork for, or create a container for, the transformative energy of God to change the world as it is, not as we imagine some spiritual world to be. That is very important, because this awakening global consciousness is an awakening to life as it really is. It's not to some spiritual ideal of life, but to the real nature of life, which is a divine being, which is not just a physical planet spinning in space with this species of human beings on top of it, but is an organic whole, is a living spiritual being that is undergoing a transformation. It is not just our transformation, you see, it is the transformation of the world. And the Sufis have always understood this reality that the world is the macrocosm and we are the microcosm. Just as we are a spiritual being, so the world is a spiritual being. It's central to Sufism, as well as, of course, to alchemy and other ancient traditions. And so it is not just humanity that is going through this transformation. Of course, that is how we experience it mostly, because we see things in our own eyes, but the world is going through a transformation, and we are part of the world. And I think if we make the right contribution, we can help the world to transform, to go from its present state of ecological crisis, spiritual crisis, into what one likes to think of as a, to quote Shakespeare, as a brave new world. Although
And how do you think it's actually going? Because
very slowly. How do I think it's going? Very slowly. Well, look, there is a truth that everything happens first on the inner planes. That everything that comes
But when you say the inner planes,
right.
Could you, what do you actually mean when you say the inner planes? Like, what do you mean when you say you were given teachings?
Right.
Where does that come from?
Right. Well, most people, the world they experience is the world of the senses. That is the only world, or the world of the mind, the world of ideas, that is the world to which they have access. But what spiritual teachings have always known is that there is another reality, or even more than one world. There is a world of pure spirit. There is also, for example, Carl Jung, the psychologist, he explored the archetypal world, what the Sufis call the mundus imaginalis, the world of symbols, the world of images, which is an interior world. You don't access it through the senses. You access the physical world through the senses, but for example, this symbolic world, which is at the foundation of many, many religions, they have a whole symbolic dimension. You think of the symbols of the Mass in Christianity. That is traditionally accessed through what is called the faculty of the active or creative imagination. And you can experience it inwardly. For example, a lot of shamanistic work takes place in that inner world. And many people today are drawn to experience the symbolic world within themselves, whether through dream work, through painting, through dance, through music, or through just using the imagination, going on shamanic journeys. They suddenly find there is another world to the world of the senses. And it's a tremendous revelation for many people. And then traditionally, beyond this archetypal world, there is what is called the world of the self with a capital S, or in India it's the world of the Atma.
The higher self.
The higher self. The higher self.
The higher consciousness.
The higher consciousness. And every human being has this spark of divine consciousness within them. And for example, in all of the traditional descriptions, once you experience that reality, you'll find it's a very different world to the world we appear to live in. For example, it's a world of pure oneness. In that world there is no duality, there are no divisions. It is also a world of pure light. The Sufis call it dimension of light upon light. It is very different to the shadowy world and all the distortions that exist in this plane. And many, many spiritual practices are designed, whether through meditation, through breath work, through chanting, or even, for example, the Mevlevi dervishes and their beautiful whirling dance, are designed to take you from this world into that world, into this world of pure being. This is, for example, in the world of the self, there is unlimited love. It is just endless. It is very, very beautiful. You go there is this ocean of love. And so many of the practices are designed to give you access to that world. And then for the mystic, there is another reality beyond this world of pure light, which is what they call the world of non-being, the world of non-existence, in which the mystic is annihilated. The medieval Christian mystic, the Blessed John Ruysbroek, talked of the dark silence in which all lovers lose themselves. It is another reality beyond the plane of the self. But for the purposes of this discussion, the energies of creation, which in India they have this expression prana, the life force, it doesn't originate in this world of the senses. It comes from the inner world. The Sufis would actually say it starts first as love, because love is behind everything in existence, this energy of love. And it comes down through the planes of manifestation, through this plane of pure being, pure love. It comes like an idea in the mind of God, if you like. And then it comes down into the symbolic world of forms, where it takes on form, where it takes on symbolic form, and then through that world of forms, which for the Sufis is also called the world of attributes, divine attributes, it then comes down into manifestation. And so everything that is created in this world begins somewhere else. You can actually see it in the individual act of creativity, because if you are going to begin a project, it begins first as an idea. It doesn't begin as a physical manifestation. You have an idea, and then a lot of the work of creativity is how can you bring that idea into manifestation. And for example, artists go through a lot of conflict because there is the purity of the idea and then the limitations of bringing something into manifestation.
Right.
And then all the conflicts and difficulties of bringing something into manifestation. But it always begins first, not in this world, but as an idea somewhere. And if you like, the big changes of humanity, or the big changes of the world, begin, if you like, as an idea of God, or as an idea of the divine nature that is at the core of humanity, which I think is the same as God. And then the work of those who have access to the inner planes, those who can have access not just to this world of the senses, is to help to midwife the idea of God, to help to bring into existence something new. And if you like, you can call it a new civilization, a new awareness. And I think there are many people who are giving their time, their energy, their consciousness particularly, to help to bring in a new way of being that supports life, that supports the world, that nourishes the soul. Why do we have to live a material life that starves the soul? It doesn't make sense. This is this split between spirit and matter that has been part of our rational civilization, that the world of the spirit and the world of matter are something separate, and you either live a spiritual life or you live a worldly life. Why does there have to be that separation? Why can't the spirit nourish the world of matter? Why can't we live in this world in a way that nourishes our souls, so we don't have to feel that life is meaningless? Why can't we recreate a way of being that speaks to the soul, that nourishes us physically, emotionally, and spiritually? And as I say, these ideas, they come first from the inner world. And it is how can we work together to bring these ideas into manifestation, to help, which is really life recreating itself. In the end, it's not our idea, it's life, because you don't have to be clairvoyant to see that life is dying, the planet is dying. Something is happening that shouldn't happen. And so life is struggling to recreate itself, to bring a new way of existence into humanity that won't pollute it to such a degree that pollute it physically and also pollute it spiritually, because we have desecrated the world more than we know.
You've often talked about how many of the problems facing our world, whether they be environmental or materialistic greed, as you've just talked about, really come from this place where the fact that humanity, that people have forgotten that the world belongs to God and not to themselves, is really what's kind of gone wrong.
Yes, it would seem we are the only culture for many, many, many centuries, millennia, that does not have the divine at the center of its existence. The center of our existence seems to be this strange thing called economic progress. That seems to be the god of our culture, which we see the success of our civilization as whether we are economically progressing. And that is really, if you look at it, it's very, very strange, because since when have things made people happy? You know, as Christ said, you can have the whole world, but if you forget your soul, what is the point? And The mystic, of course, knows that the divine is the center of everything. In fact, what is interesting is the divine is at the center of our forgetfulness as much as our remembrance. It is part of the mystery of the divine, how he hides and reveals himself. And for some reason, in the last few centuries in the West, he has hidden himself. And he has given us the fruits of technology. He's given us advances in medicine. He has given us advances in science, computer technology. Many things have been given to humanity, but at a certain cost.
Well, they haven't been used for the sake of humanity. They've been used for the sake of, to continue this constant cycle of materialism and greed and forgetfulness.
That is possible, yes. I think some of the advances in medicine and things have helped people. And some of the advances in technology have also helped humanity. For example, the internet has given us the ability to connect anywhere on the planet. But yes, this demon of greed seems to be walking with big boots across the planet.
The medicine that has now been created to help the sick, but is only available to the few who can afford it. And
the few who are rich, yes.
Few who are rich,
yeah.
and that there doesn't seem to be a regard for life beyond self-interest.
Yeah, this seems to be part of humanity's ability to corrupt whatever it is given and to kind of bring it to the lowest common denominator. But the important question you mentioned before, which has to do with in a way, returning an awareness of the divine to the center of life. And I think many, many people are trying to do that in their own ways, through trying to live in a more sacred manner, whether it is just doing a particular spiritual practice or trying to honor the sacred. There are many different ways to do it. One of my favorite is the practice of the presence of God by the Blessed John Ruysbrough, by Brother Lawrence, practice of the presence of God by Brother Lawrence, who said, whatever you do with God. He was a monk, he worked in the kitchens, and he peeled the potatoes with God, he washed the carrots with God. Whatever you do with God. Those simple practices, I think many people are doing them in their own way to bring the sacred back to the center of their life. I think that's very, very important, because without the sacred back in the center of life, any civilization dies. It is because the civilization is not nourished, the soul is not nourished, and human beings are not just physical bodies here to experience the pleasures of life. They are immortal souls that are here to nourish their soul, to grow. And if you only nourish the physical being and starve the soul, then the civilization will die. It cannot sustain that, because something essential in life is missing. And the work now is not just how to remedy that individually,
but how to remedy it collectively.
How to remedy it collectively. And that is a very big question, because we have gone so far to the extreme of self-interest, of materialism, and whether that will change, or whether it can change without humanity encountering some disaster that forces it to wake up, I don't know.
I've often thought about if it's possible for humanity to make that shift without this tremendous, calamity, or a series of calamities, whether that be, physical, environmental, financial, whatnot, that whether they can make a transition without that happening. And it seems like the current systems are so entrenched and so ingrained in their mindset of continuing that cycle of materialism and greed and self-interest and lack of care, awareness about the whole, that unless you break it, they won't adapt.
Yeah, that is a kind of rather pessimistic approach to global oneness, that the only thing that brings humanity together is some kind of global disaster. You did see after the tsunami of last year, you did see humanity coming together to help each other. And that is, from all over the world. There was material support, there were prayers, there was...
But just as quick as everyone came together, they
went
on their
apart.
way when it wasn't on CNN anymore.
Yeah.
And the suffering of millions of people had been, replaced by the latest gossip on the TV news.
Yeah, no, I agree. It is. I don't, you see, I don't say I have any answers. I just feel that spiritual mystical consciousness has an important part to play. And I don't think it is written in stone how it is going to play that part. I do think that those who have been given an awareness of another reality apart from the physical reality have a responsibility at this time of global crisis that maybe they are not fully taking. Maybe because nobody told them they had a part to play, they have a responsibility. But how that is going to evolve is going to be very, very interesting to see how spiritual consciousness, how awakened consciousness can help to make the world make this transformation that is necessary. Of course, there is a possibility it might not make this transformation, and we will have another era of, kind of doomsday scenario of greed and pollution and who knows what, not on a complete global scale. And when the oil runs out, what will humanity do?
This question of responsibility I find very interesting, and I wonder if you could speak about not specifically the responsibility of you or your tradition and the people you work with, but the responsibility that people feel once they've been, as you said, awakened in some way, and that could be through a spiritual experience, it could be, just realizing that what's going on in the world is bigger than themselves, and they suddenly feel a certain sense of responsibility, both for their individual self and for the collective well-being. What do people do in that situation? Because I think they're often left not sure where to go.
I agree. What do you do when you have been given a glimpse of something beyond yourself? And here I would say, first of all, we have to reclaim the wisdom of the feminine, which has been sorely overlooked in our culture, because the initial response is, what should I do? And I would add to that, how should I be? Because being is the wisdom of the feminine. And in my understanding, it is our doing that has caused so many problems in the world. You cannot solve a problem on the same level that created it. And we all think, what should we do? Which is a very masculine response. And my first response was, first of all, hold the experience, hold the awareness. I think awareness is very, very powerful. I think consciousness is very, very powerful. I think that what can change the world is awakened consciousness rather than lots of plans.
So it's really action versus intention.
To hold the intention and then to learn to listen. And to learn to listen because my sense is life and the planet is actually very old and very wise. It has actually been through many disasters over the billions of years it has been here. And that if we realize we are part of life, we are part of the planet. Even our spiritual light is part of the spiritual light of the planet. And maybe we should listen to life. We should listen to this organic, ancient being of which we are a part. And maybe if we learn to listen and offer our awareness in service to life, a simple thing, it's just an inner act of prayer, really, an inner act of offering. Sufis, we are lovers, so we say, beloved, how can I help you? But not just to think of some disembodied God. This is the big problem. This is the monotheistic God that was kind of banished to heaven. But when we say God, when we say beloved, when we say the divine, include all of creation, because it is His creation. This is the feminine side of the divine. This is the Sufis who talk about the immanence of God, not just the transcendence of God, not just the Deus absconditus, but the immanence of God. And if we say to that divine, which is life, I am here in service to you. Use me as only you know how to use me. You see, then my sense is that then if we make a relationship, because a lot of spiritual, mystical practices are how do you make a relationship with God? And out of that relationship we can learn how to participate, or life can show us how to participate, how to bring our light, our knowledge, our understanding, where it can be of most in service to the whole. Because we are part of the whole. We are, if you like, our light, our divine light is a light cell in the living organism of the whole. And there is in the world, you see, there is this divine consciousness. If you like, it was known as the anima mundi, the soul of the world. It has been forgotten in our culture because we have forgotten so much. But just because it has been forgotten, it doesn't mean that it's no longer there. There is in the world this divine consciousness. It's very, very beautiful. Tremendous power. And it knows how to transform the world. It knows how to, in a way, to shake off the debris of materialism. It knows how to heal the pollution that has been done to it. It is very old, it is infinitely wise, it has many, many hidden qualities. It's tremendously powerful. And if we can work together with that divine intelligence within the world, see, that's where I have, if you like, a certain limitation with most of the people who commit themselves to working in the fields of ecology and other ways of helping the world. It's they have forgotten the divine intelligence that is the world. And as somebody said, why talk about sustainability if you're not going to talk about the sustainer? We cannot do this work on our own, but we don't know how. It is, the world is such a complex living being. But there is in the world a divine intelligence that knows how to heal and transform the world. There is the anima mundi, the soul of the world. And it is that helps the world to transform and helps the world to change and knows the part that we can play. So I would say, why not work with that divine intelligence? Why not work with the boss? Why not work with the creative energy of life? Rather than trying to do some sort of band-aid on the surface, full of good intentions, but very, very limited. Why not give our light back to God? Back to God not as some disembodied God, not some God that only exists in heaven, but the God that is also present in every butterfly, every leaf, every debris in the river, every Coke can. Give it back to everything. And then see what happens. Then you're actually working with this divine intelligence within life. And that, to me, is much more exciting than just trying to heal the problems of the world on our own, which I don't think we can. I think, in fact, things have got so far that we cannot do it on our own, that we need the divine back in life. We need to bring the divine back into our own life and into the life of the world. And I don't think it needs many people to do that, you see. Traditionally, it has never been done by the collective. The collective benefits tremendously, of course, but I think that there are enough groups of sincere seekers around the world who can do this work together, individually and together.
So they would be able to infuse a divine consciousness into a collective environment which could change the way people are operating, whether that be trying to change the world in their own way through environmental concerns and issues.
I think the divine can infuse its consciousness into the world through the vehicle of the consciousness of those who have made this inner commitment. I think it is the divine that has to come back into the world. I don't think it is we who can do it, but we can be, if you like, midwives of this reawakening, of this new birth. We can help to facilitate it. There is this word now people like to use. We can be co-creators. As in this lovely poem the story Rumi tells of the sheikh, the Sufi sheikh who had his one hand cut off. He was mistaken for a thief, and he had one hand cut off. And he lived in a little hut outside of town, and he did basket weaving. And everybody wondered, how could he do basket weaving with only one hand? But he never did basket weaving when anybody was there. And then one day a young boy came to look, and he saw that the sheikh had one hand, and there was also a hand from the unseen world, from the inner world, that was working together with him. And Rumi says, when we leave our anxieties, then the real cooperative work can begin. We work together with the divine. And it is his world, it is the world. The world belongs to God. The fact even to think the world belongs to humanity is a big joke. It is an act of complete hubris. And the world belongs to God. And if he wants to transform the world, yes, we can participate. On our own, we can do nothing. But this is what every mystic knows. You cannot change yourself without the help of God. You cannot, it is said, you take one step towards him, he takes 10 towards you. You cannot do it on your own. Nobody can. And what is true of the individual on the journey back to God is also true of the macrocosm, of the whole. It cannot change and transform. Global consciousness cannot be awakened without the participation of God, of the divine. Because most people, when you say God, they think of some transcendent, father figure with a long beard sitting in a cloud. But God, the divine, is present in everything, in every breath you breathe, in every thought you think, in every flower you see, in everything. It is the last gasp of a dying man. It is the first cry of a newborn child. It is in everything, the divine. We just don't see it. We are blind to it.
We've forgotten.
We have forgotten. We have forgotten, and we have also forgotten the tools to help us to remember. But interestingly, in the last few decades in the West, we have been given back some of those tools to help some of the tools of spiritual awakening that were kind of what you would call these esoteric practices that have come from the East, whether awareness of breath or certain mantras or certain other spiritual practices. We have been given back these tools to help us to be aware again of the divine, not as some idea, not as a figure in a book, but as a living reality. And many, many people today in the West have this direct experience of the divine. And if they don't have it, they want it. As one great Sufi, Jami, said, why listen to second-hand reports when you can hear the beloved speak himself? And people today, they want a direct experience of the divine. They don't want somebody to tell them how it is in a book. Yeah. But then the question is, then when you get it, what do you do with it? How do you use it to help the world? And that is what interests me. How do you use this divine awareness you have to help the world at its time of need?
Well, it's funny because you've talked very much about how this new consciousness is not accessible just to initiates, to people who are serious practitioners on the path, who have experience dealing with this energy, but it's available to anyone, who wants to participate.
Yeah.
And it's much easier to imagine how somebody who is a mature, experienced spiritual seeker can respond to that energy when they have been given access to it. But for someone who has not had any experience to have that energy, what they do with it.
Yeah, that is, what they do with it, how they learn to work with it, how they learn it is. But then there are, in our own little way, we have put some of these teachings on the internet. We have a website, Working with Oneness, and we have put some of these teachings on the internet in audio and also in video clips. So they are available to anybody. That is a little contribution we can make, because part of the wonder of the internet is you can put things there so they are freely downloadable by anybody all over the world. So there are people in Malaysia, people in Australia, people in China who are accessing this information. And that is a little contribution that we have made here in our Sufi work, so that when people have some of these awakenings or have some of these experiences, if they want, they can find their way to certain teachings I have been given about how they can use them. Whether they do find their way, if there is real need, there is this lovely Sufi story about Mushkil Gosha, the remover of obstacles. And it says, if you are in real need, you will always find your way. It's one of the strange miracles of life. And if you are really sincere, you will find what you need. You will find the way to work with the divine light within you. You will find the way to access your own wisdom and use it for its highest possible purpose. And also use it for the need of the time, because Sufis are children of the moment. And there is a real need at this moment in time for spiritually committed people to help the world make this transition from a society based on separation and dualism into one based on oneness. And that is not something esoteric. This is apparent. You can see it everywhere. We cannot sustain ourselves through greed and consumerism anymore. And so there is a real need. And this is the need of the moment. And so if you are given access to a certain spiritual awareness, use it for the sake of the whole. Use it for the glory of God in the world, not for some, I think, slightly limited view of how can it help me become more spiritually aware. I think it's time we grow up a little bit and realize the ancient truth is that spiritual work, like shamanism, like alchemy, is always for the sake of the whole. It is always for the glory of God.